It is the duty of the free man to resist tyranny at every turn. Every man will either watch his freedom stripped away or take action to protect what he loves. Introducing the A3, the newest revolutionary body armor from Armored Republic. The A3 is the new standard for lightweight multi-hit body armor. A3 plates are incredibly light at 4.6 pounds. The patented design captures fragmentation while remaining multi-hit capable. The A3 will stop up to M80 ball, yet comes in at only 0.7 inches thick. The A3 is the thinnest NIJ.06 compliant or certified composite standalone plate that includes the drop test. The A3 is the first of its kind, patent pending, that combines an alloy strike face with polyethylene backing, revolutionizing body armor technology by providing strength and durability while remaining sleek and maneuverable. The A3 is the new standard in lightweight body armor. The fight against tyranny just got stronger.
Looking for a job isn't easy. It used to be that you could apply at a big-name tech company and build a great career for yourself. But times have changed. Many of these companies have gone full woke. And if you aren't the right gender, ethnicity, you don't use pronouns, or if you're not an activist for the preferred cause, then good luck. Why would you risk your career on that? At Red Balloon, we're connecting good employees with top quality companies that value you for your skills and your work ethic, not your social activism score. Employers who post jobs on Red Balloon are focused on creating an enjoyable and productive work culture, free from divisive woke mandates. So if you want to find a serious career path without the nonsense, come to Red Balloon and post your resume today. Because you shouldn't have to choose between your job and your values. That's redballoon.work, where you can find your future.
Hey y'all, welcome to Cross Politic on the Fight Laugh Feast Network. Pastor Toby Chuck Knox, I'm the Water Boy. It's good to be with you. We also have our now canceled friend in the PCA.
Wait, not yet. We don't know that yet.
Oh, we don't know that yet?
We gotta wait till the end of the show to get that kind of information.
Soon to be canceled.
I have a feeling.
So you do know, I guess. Okay, never mind. My bad.
Pastor Zach Garris from New Mexico, just outside of Los Alamos. And for our listeners, I went to a Presbyterian church in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
One time?
For 1 year, for a whole year.
Oh,
we moved, my dad moved there to work at Intel back in the day. And then we moved back to Texas and we went back to our old
I knew
Presbyterian
you were
church,
waiting for some reason to bring
Sorry about Texas.
So,
right back.
So we were there for in New Mexico for 1 year, went right back to Texas. We're like, screw New Mexico.
I knew that was
This is horrible. So
Gabe, right in front of him. Don't say that.
Hey,
all right.
we're in the best part of New Mexico.
It's true.
It's true. The most
Mexico.
Texas-like part of
The least Texas part.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful where he's at.
Mountains.
No,
Hey, let me just remind you guys, Grace Agenda 2023 is here in Moscow, Idaho in August.
And full.
Is it?
I mean, I don't know if it's totally sold out, but I mean, it's.
You guys.
Well, that's what full means.
Well, you keep putting the ad in here for me to read.
I'm just trying to tell our listeners, if you're going to come, you better sign up now because it's probably got a week left. That's all.
So it's not full.
So it's not full yet.
I don't know.
So don't listen to Gabe. Anyways, Christian parents have an amazing task of raising their children to love and worship the Lord Jesus, to lead their generation, to be the sort of faithful saints that can do the same for their own children after them. So you want to sign up now. Registration is almost full. That's what it says, almost full.
Okay.
Right? So Gabe's wrong.
Fair enough.
But it's probably going to be full very soon. Go to graceagenda.com today and register. The theme this year is good education in the Badlands. And if you can't make the conference in person, all the talks will be posted to YouTube. And we encourage you to consider donating to the conference if you want to support this kind of thing at graceagenda.com/donate.
Message.
And you got it to work.
Yeah, I'm working over here. What have you guys done to my equipment? I leave and everything goes.
You were gone for a week, so it's all your fault. Hey, we're really grateful to have Pastor Zach Garris in the studio with us. He's pastor at Bryce Avenue Presbyterian Church in the PCA in White Rock, New Mexico. He's a graduate of Reformed Theological Seminary, and he's a lawyer, you guys.
No way.
I knew there was something about you
No
that was
way.
like a little.
You know, he's talking about words.
Yeah, he was like, you have
it
to be
depends on how you
careful
say
about
it.
how you say
Wait,
things.
I'm
Yeah, and I was
sorry,
like, no, you
time out,
don't.
Time out. Were you a lawyer and then you became a pastor? Or were you a pastor and then became a lawyer?
Yeah, actually, I became a lawyer first, but I had gone to seminary before, so
But you were.
I knew better.
So, okay. Whew.
So he went to Wayne State University for law school. He's also the author of this book right here, Masculine Christianity. Keep your fingers off it. Don't touch it.
I see.
Don't touch it. Yeah.
I didn't get a copy.
Are you done?
Do you have a wife and kids?
Yes.
It's not in your bio.
Oh,
I shorted it down.
yeah.
How many kids?
Second on the way. Second
Okay.
son.
And so
Nice.
since you're Presbyterian, they
They're baptized.
okay, yeah. just wanted to make sure.
I take
Baptize your kids if you have children.
I take a vow to the Westminster Standard, so
Yeah.
I have to baptize my baby.
Yeah.
Whoa,
Well, you're a
yeah.
Christian, so you baptize your babies.
You also understand that Abrahamic covenant.
Yeah,
And you're like,
so
all right.
it's
Anyways, so Zach, what made you write this book? Isn't masculinity
Toxic.
kind of toxic? I mean, don't we have enough John Wayne Christianity to go around?
And Dabney's.
We'll get there.
Why masculine Christianity? I don't remember when it came out, but it's been a few years.
Yeah, let's see, 2020.
Yeah.
First came out. So
clearly, during COVID, we had plenty of masculinity to go around.
Yes.
So much.
Why?
Overabundance.
Isn't this like pulling out the fire extinguishers when you have a flood?
Yeah, I mean, part of this was, I think, just a response to egalitarianism in the church.
Yeah.
I'm trying to respond to a lot of the egalitarian arguments, feminist arguments with Scripture, which you see a ton of in commentaries nowadays. Obviously, we have tons of books that are, I think, undermining biblical teaching on these things. So I tried to write a comprehensive book on gender roles, really. On man, what does it mean to be man and woman? God's design for men and women.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to Genesis, the creation account, and then throughout the Scriptures. So it's meant to be a comprehensive book on the subject.
Since it seems like the whole culture has absolutely gone insane, what exactly is a man? just curious.
Well, if I have to define it for you, you're in trouble, I think. But
Well, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
We're in trouble.
Have you turned on the news lately? We in trouble. We have no idea.
I mean, obviously, man. I mean, I argue in the book as far as masculinity goes. God's design for men and women, differs, but which is rooted in the creation account. So God has designed men to exercise authority. I mean, obviously, there's the biological differences that should be obvious, but that these things are supposed to play out differently in how we live. So, a man is supposed to protect and provide. Those are kind of the main duties he's placed on men. Especially in relation to the family, their wife and children, and then I argue a wife is supposed to be domestically oriented. So. Having children, caring for them, and in the home and the like. So,
But Zach, you're in the PCA, and in the PCA, everyone there understands male, female roles, right?
they should. I think there's, this goes for all of kind of conservative, what we call conservative, evangelicalism or Protestantism, whatever you want to say. I mean, there's just a ton of feminist influences. I mean, that's just the way it is. And I think some of that's just come from over the years, strain from maybe the biblical teaching. And then of course we have the culture, influencing the church. And so there's definitely disagreement within the PCA on some of these things. I'm sure not everybody likes my book. So
I grew up in the PCA in the 80s and 90s, and I couldn't imagine some of the debates the PCA is having now. With side B sexuality, Greg Johnson, women pastors. Apparently, there's a debate about women pastors now in the PCA.
I haven't seen anyone arguing for women pastors, but I have seen women preaching. We have that right now. Covenant College, which is a PCA institution.
My brother went there for 6 months.
Yeah, and
left.
There's
Wait. Women preaching at Covenant College.
At their chapel service. You can go YouTube it. It's obvious. It's right there. I don't know how many people know it's happening, but it's definitely
what
there.
So have you asked about it? What are they saying? Is anybody saying anything about it?
Well, it's come up some, amongst some pastors, maybe some online forums. I mean, some guys defend this stuff. They're saying, it's a chapel service. It's not I guess because it's not Sunday morning. I mean, I say it's a public worship assembly. It doesn't matter that they're not serving the Lord's Supper.
Right.
It still is a violation of 1 Timothy 2.
Right.
And I think that's, I don't know how you get there, honestly. So
wow. So that's the defense. The defense though is this is a chapel service. This isn't the church service.
That's one defense.
Okay.
I don't know. I haven't heard a lot of commentary on it.
And you told us before the show that your church has actually offered an overture to General Assembly. Is that where it is?
Yeah, that's right. So we drafted an overture that essentially bans women preaching, teaching, or exhorting in a public worship assembly, and then it adds some language about basically any public assembly where men are present, which would include chapel services. So it's supposed to be pretty narrow in the sense of just applying to a formal public worship assembly. I think the language is pretty clear, but so it would address something like what's happening at Covenant College.
But your presbytery didn't endorse it?
No, they rejected it. They gave some different reasons.
When you say presbytery, you mean like men?
Yes.
Okay.
like elders and
Elders.
pastors.
Yeah. Ruling elders and teaching elders. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind
So
of like
they
after
rejected it.
Titus and Timothy. Okay, just making sure. Just trying to figure that part out.
Doc's been out of studio for somebody needs to be brought up to speed.
But even though they rejected it, it's still able to go up to the General Assembly.
Yeah, it's kind of funny thing about the PCA polity. But yeah, the rules allow us to send a rejected overture.
Yeah.
We can't change it, but the church itself, the session can vote to send
it
it up. So then it goes to the overtures committee for the General Assembly, and then they can send it. They can modify it. They can send it before the assembly to vote on it, which is in June.
Or not.
Or not. But I'm hoping they do.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Pastor. What were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to ask, what were the reasons that your presbytery gave for?
Did they give you any reasons?
Yeah, they gave some. They gave a variety of reasons. Some guys argued it was unclear. I mean, this is, of course, pretty typical for what we hear, even with things like the overtures on homosexual identity or description. So you hear kind of similar arguments, which, I mean, obviously I'm arguing in favor of these overtures. I think we need to say something. We should say it the best we can. But, that was rejected again, too. There was another overture this year on homosexual. Well, last year was homosexual identity. This one was if an officer describes himself as a homosexual.
Yep.
Now, so both of those, the last 2 years, passed the General Assembly, but they failed at the presbytery level. They were only getting, you need 2/3 of the presbyteries. They were getting over 60%, but not enough.
Yeah.
But there's a whole slate of overtures related to this again this year. So this is not over in the PCA.
Would they say the same thing about, 1 Timothy chapter 2? It's just unclear.
Well,
it seems
look,
like
Okay,
if you can make that,
that's the Bible.
if you can make that argument here.
Well, let me say this. Just, I mean, who's one of the more prominent guys in the PCA would be Tim Keller, right?
Yeah.
He's spoken to this some, but his wife has a whole booklet out there called Jesus, Justice and Gender Roles. Have you guys read that?
Is she a teaching elder?
She's not, but you can go read this. So this tells you, I would think, is Tim's view. She basically says this is the view at Redeemer,
Right.
which he's retired now, but
Right.
and so they promote that whole phrase, a woman may do anything a non-ordained man may do. And so I address that in the book here, of course. So that's one view. And so she actually even argues in that booklet that Paul in 1 Timothy 2, which just so listeners know what he says, it's I do not permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man.
Right.
Kathy Keller says that Paul is only prohibiting an authoritative teaching. So she combines those. That's actually an egalitarian argument. That's something Philip Payne does in his writings. He's egalitarian. So that's what she says Paul's prohibiting. So
Only teaching that it's authoritative.
Authoritative teaching. So that actually would allow, I don't think she pushes it in there, but that would allow a woman to preach in a public worship assembly.
Yeah.
If you take that view. So and I think that's wrong.
Because the argument would be, I'm teaching in an unauthoritative way.
Or it's under the authority of the elders.
Oh, I see.
I mean, you probably heard that, right? And
Sure.
so this is one thing I address in the book is we're seeing a very narrow complementarianism today.
Right. I was going to ask you, your chapters, you have a chapter in there on like complementarian compromises.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is complementarianism as a movement, which was basically started in the late 80s and then in the 90s. And you still have it around today. You have the Council of Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. And then you have the book that Piper and Grudem edited, Recovering from Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. Sorry, that's the Amy Bird book.
That was Recovery.
Yeah, it's just
Recovering
it's
from,
confusion.
recovering.
So recovery. It's supposed to be recovering biblical manhood and womanhood.
Yeah.
And the Piper and Grudem book, I think, is overall pretty good, but there's some things I would disagree with in there. But they were responding to evangelical feminism,
right?
And so I think, and they were also trying to do something new. I mean, and that was clear, the term, right?
Right.
Complementarian. I mean, sometimes in the early writings, they would use the word traditionalist. But it became clear they were trying to separate themselves from the earlier reformers.
Yeah, headship and submission.
Yeah, but they didn't want to be called traditionalists or... they definitely moved away from the earlier Reformed interpretation of 1 Corinthians 14, 34, and 35, where it says the women should be silent in the churches.
Right.
So there was a new interpretation of that. But I think they also they started to maybe detach some of the commands or teaching on male headship and that women shouldn't be pastors. They detached these some from, God's design of men and women. And so it was like just this really, like just going off the command and not rooting it like Paul does, like in creation.
Right.
And so that allows them to, I guess sometimes you see it was like they don't really know why God made it this way.
Right.
And then it just really opened the door, I think, for some very narrow views. And, today complementarianism is very diverse. If somebody says they're a complementarian, I have to ask them what they mean by that because I don't know.
Like at Covenant College.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I mean, if somebody's calling themselves a complementarian and thinks a woman can preach to men, but they don't hold the women pastors. I mean, that's just. I mean, we've moved so far from.
I think the word you're looking for is lame.
Well, yeah, it's definitely lame. Yeah.
It seems to me like complementarianism when it started to really gain traction in, I'd say, the 2000s, late 2000s. Would that be fair to say? Complementarianism?
Or, I mean, it was earlier than that. I mean, the 90s.
I mean, it came around in the 90s, but yeah, it
but it
definitely grew in
big
the
time. Because I
2000s.
remember Mark Driscoll started saying he's complementarian. Matt Chandler started saying they're complementarian. And it always seemed to me like it was a backdoor way that was going to get back to feminism.
Well, that's where it's gone. I don't think that's what they necessarily intended.
I don't think Mark did at all.
Right.
But it was
what's
like
happened.
It's like when I remember when that terminology really started picking up steam. I was like, yeah, of course, I think my wife compliments me or completes me or whatever.
And men and
she
women
helps
are
me.
complementary in the church and in the society.
Like I don't have a problem with that, but like, why not use headship and submission and like Christ in the church? What Ephesians 5 says. I don't find complementarianism in those with that terminology in the Bible. And I think that's been caused a lot of problems in the church because it's almost like they're reacting to feminism, trying to find a better way to basically couch biblical marriage to a society that didn't use headship and submission, but was responding to feminism.
Right.
And now,
it's more palatable. It's a little more winsome. It's a little more nice sounding because
third wayism.
Yeah, right. I think that's right.
So, Pastor, help me understand. You said that the argumentation that people are using right now is a woman can do anything an unordained man can do, and you said you argue about that in your book. You make a distinction. Could you just give us a sample of how you speak against that?
Yeah. So, I've seen just to say who's using that. I at least know Tim Keller does. And John Frame.
I've seen a lot of people in the SBC use it as well.
Yeah. I think there's at least two problems with it. The first is they may be allowing non-ordained men to do too much in a worship service. So there's a problem there. Areas where this apply would be reading scripture in public worship, leading prayers. And you'd be surprised. There's a lot of, guys who would call themselves conservatives, and they're having women lead prayer up front.
Tons of them have them lead prayer when it's set to music.
Yeah. But that's another issue.
I think people. I mean, literally. I mean, I think people are idiots. Like seriously.
What Bible verse is that?
It's the whole book of Proverbs.
Facts.
I mean,
Well said.
Fool, idiot.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
It's like I don't think women should lead in prayer, but if you put it to music, have 6 of them up there. Like, no, you'd have women leading you. I mean, some of the most conservative people do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that. Why is so one of
Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Well, okay,
the other
so
point.
that's
that's just me. That's not Pastor Zach. That's just me.
And Proverbs. Pastor Toby and
and Proverbs and Paul and Jesus.
Okay.
I think the whole worship service should be led only by ordained males, so that would be ruling elders and teaching elders, and licentiates, so maybe men training for the ministry. So this should be a limited thing. So that I know it's a pretty conservative position, but I think that's traditionally what the Reformed held. And so in other words, a non-ordained man shouldn't be up there leading a lot of these things in the first place. So that's part of the problem with that phrase. But the other thing is there are passages that explicitly prohibit women in particular from doing things, and that's 1 Timothy 2 and 1 Corinthians 14. So they say that the women, 1 Corinthians 14, if you adopt the traditional position, is that women should not speak publicly in the worship service.
Right.
So they shouldn't lead anything up front. And then 1 Timothy 2 it's targeting women. There's nothing directed at men in general. I do not permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man.
Right.
So that even if you had a looser view of non-ordained men in the public worship service, you have these 2 passages targeting women as placing prohibitions on women. So yeah, that view's just, it doesn't make sense of the Bible.
So you were arguing earlier that this is rooted in creation. Can you, because a lot of times I think in these conversations, what the left or the people who are not nearly as conservative, as they're making arguments, they make them so that they're emotionally felt. It seems wrong,
Right.
to withhold a woman from being.
From exercising her
You
gifts.
guys had the show with Rick Warren. Rick Warren was talking about this. It's like women preach the gospel. They proclaim the gospel out there. When Jesus was risen from the dead, they went and proclaimed it. They have duties where they tell other and disciple people. And so we do a good job of saying, yeah, that's not right. But what does a positive version of that look like? Why are we doing it so that it's men? What is the argument for the proper way of doing it? And what is the impact of that versus the other side?
Yeah, so that's one thing I try to argue in the book is that these commands in Scripture for men to rule in the church, and so to limit preaching to men, that's rooted in God's design in creation. So for like Adam, for example, you see he's told in Genesis 2:15 to work and keep the garden. So he's got this task to work, which I tie with providing for his family. And then keeping is another way to translate it as guarding. So he's a protector.
Right.
And so that, of course, applies to the family. Man as the head of his household, he has to protect and provide his household. But I also apply that to the church, that some men are called to be elders. And what do? They protect and provide. So they are
they're shepherds.
Yeah, they're shepherds. So what does a shepherd do? He defends the sheep.
Right.
So protect from false teaching. That's 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1 says in elders to be able to rebuke those who contradict sound teaching. So that's certainly the protection aspect. And then, but I would also say the provision aspect, they're supposed to teach the word of God, right? So they're supposed to guard these things. That's entrusted to not all men, but some men, that God has gifted and called and ordained in the church. And so I think we see that connection even in the creation account. It's not just 1 Timothy 2 and 1 Corinthians 14. It's the whole Bible. It all works together, and it forms a cohesive whole.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, that the whole idea of, I think one of the weaknesses of complementarianism, and you see this even in really well-meaning conservative places, is that they are holding on to what it says in Ephesians 5 or 1 Timothy 2 still, and they say it, but they have no idea why. And I think, obviously I prefer somebody to try to obey, not understanding, than just throw it out the window.
Right.
But I do think that's a setup for, over time, you don't understand why, you don't understand why, you don't understand why. And then you start looking for the explanation. Maybe I misunderstood the command. And then you read an egalitarian or a feminist who says, actually, the Greek can be understood this way, even though it takes a little bit of gymnastics and origami, but we can get it out there, and you say, oh, that makes more sense because the other one never made any sense to me.
Right.
And then the emotional appeal
That's right.
comes in. But I think you're absolutely right. Going back to 1 Timothy 2 in particular, for the man was made first, and the woman was deceived, not the man. I mean, those are not popular verses, but that's rooted in Genesis.
Creational.
Genesis 2 and 3 gives you the reasons why a woman is not to teach or have authority over men in the church.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem here is, I mean, because of our culture, a lot of even Christians, pastors as well, are assuming a lot of egalitarian philosophical principles. So that's they're coming at the text as egalitarians. And of course, if you believe the Bible and you read like 1 Timothy 2, you're like, well, I have to fit this in somehow. Paul prohibits women from doing something. But they're inclined towards taking the most narrow view possible.
Minimalistic.
And like you said, so they don't have a basis. So, I think it's pretty common, a pastor, if he's going through Ephesians, which, a lot of pastors do, get to Ephesians 5, and then you're going to, tiptoe around it. Wives, submit to your husband. Well, let me focus on husbands, love your wives.
Mutual
It's
submission.
both, right? Or mutual
yeah.
submission, but it's, right? I mean, Paul addresses both, men and women.
It means the man is the tiebreaker.
Yeah, you hear
51.
You hear that too, right?
Yeah,
So, this idea that in marriage, authority only comes into play when there's a disagreement.
So it
Yeah,
seems.
which is not, I mean, how, like that's not leadership.
No.
Like just to be really clear, like that's not
Yeah.
leadership, is to be like,
If you're breaking the disagreement.
yeah, like,
So, like when the Holy Spirit and Jesus are arguing, basically, you're the Father gets to say, "All right, guys, that doesn't work that way, right? That's not how the Godhead models itself, right?
right.
So,
If you got a question?
No, I do. So I think the reason that there's a couple things, and I'll try and get to my question quickly. I think when we gave up on slavery because we didn't know how to argue for it biblically and argue what it was biblically, and chattel slavery influenced our interpretation of Scripture, we gave up one of the things in Ephesians that the Bible talks about. And so we started eroding, which is the fact that there is a form of biblical slavery, indentured servitude, that lasts for 6-7 years. Right. And it's a form of blessing one who does not have the means to be blessed, to come in under your house, under your authority, to train, teach, disciple, and then to send them off with wealth over that period of time, right? We've forgotten about that, and we let the world influence a chattel form of slavery into the idea of biblical slavery. Husbands, love your wives. Children, obey your parents. First, husbands, obey Christ. Wives, submit to your husbands. Husbands, love your wives, right? And then, after children obeying parents, it's slaves, obey your masters, right? And then it says, masters, remember, you have a master in heaven. So it sets up a form of hierarchy, and we don't have any concept of that because we've blown up one of them. And it's a horrible form of logic. It's like, well, since we've blown up this last one, I guess we got to blow up the rest of them. And that's kind of what happened.
There definitely is a connection between what I would call abolitionism, like the abolitionist mindset from the 1800s, related to the Civil War. And if you take that logic, which I think you could want to get rid of slavery, but I'm talking about the view that says slavery is always wrong. Right. Like that the Bible doesn't allow any form of slavery. Well, that's wrong.
Now.
I mean, the Bible obviously,
Right.
you read Ephesians, like you said.
Well, there was a book called Philemon.
Right.
Yeah. So then if you take that philosophy, which I think is an egalitarian form of egalitarianism, and you go with that consistently, you're going to overturn, and that's what they do. They overturn male headship.
The reason I was bringing that up was because this actually has implications not just for the offices of elder and deacon and so on and so forth. This has implications all the way out to politics, society, and jobs in society. And that's why I think part of the fight is because if you get, however you view those offices, starts to tell you what kind of jobs women can have in society. And right now we're like, well, women can do whatever they want to do in society. They can be police officers. They can be in the military. They can be drafted and they can go fight. The reason we're having that kind of argument is because the cult of the society, Christianity, has forgotten the hierarchical structure and the metaphysics of that structure. What is a woman and what is she for, right? And so when we start looking at this text, we're saying, hey, now if this is changed and whatever, a woman can do whatever she wants to in society, she can hold public office. Well, no, right? No, she can't. She's not designed for that. It's not what she's for. And so there's things that I think that we're getting at inside of the text that's causing corruption downstream of that.
Well, one thing I argue in the book there, and this is somewhere a lot of complementarians don't want to go, is I do think it's logically consistent to argue out from the home. So if a husband is supposed to lead his household, I mean, that's also one reason why only men are to lead in the church. It also follows that only men should lead in the civil sphere. If we're talking like offices, like
these are governments.
Yeah, government officials, like a governor or a president, that should be limited to men. That's God's design for men. Now, if you get into the reformers on this, there was some debate between like Knox and Calvin, where Knox actually argued that women rulers were
the monstrous regiment of women.
Yeah,
I always like Knox.
Illegitimate.
You should write the part 2. The return of the monstrous regiment of women.
Yeah, I'd
There's
buy
a Monty
that one.
Python skit there somewhere.
Note taken.
So that's Knox's view, is that it's illegitimate. Of course, that got him into trouble once Bloody Mary died.
Yeah.
And you had Elizabeth come in there. But Calvin, and it seems the view of the other reformers was, well, it's not illegitimate for a woman to rule, but it certainly is not normative. Right. And it shouldn't be the norm that women are having to lead and or trying to lead in public office. Of course, we have today where that's the norm. If you don't have an equal number of men and women, leading these positions. But here's the thing. This actually goes back to first wave feminism. And I have some quotes in there. I think it was Anna Howard Shaw. She was she was actually a Methodist minister for a time. So you had some...
That was your first clue.
Yes, you had some pastors way back then. But a leader in the women's rights movement, which is first wave feminism. And she even has a quote in there about wanting to be a politician. She didn't think it would happen at the time, but she says, I confess to wanting to be a politician and then wanting to be a police officer. Right. So this stuff was all in the 1800s. It didn't come out of nowhere in the 60s and 70s. This is not new. Right. The seeds were planted 150 years ago. Right. And you can see the connections. And so basically that's where we've been going for a long time. And I agree, it's this undermining of just even the biology. Obviously, you can just look at a man and a woman's body is not designed for that kind of role. That is just something a man is supposed to do.
Yeah, I mentioned this just as an example. I mentioned this on the show before, but I saw the new Top Gun Maverick. Have you seen this? The new Top Gun?
I haven't.
Okay.
He's holier than that.
He's obviously. Anyways, I mean, it's a fun flick, all things being equal. But there is this part of the show is this. They've got to take this one particular flight in, and they describe how a normal person, a normal man will, in order to do this certain number of G's, you will black out. Uh-huh. Like the question is will you come back out of it fast enough to then complete the mission and not get shot down or not go down? And of course, they have to have their token woman that gets selected for the final thing. But biologically, a woman's lungs and heart capacity are simply not the same as a man's. And I was actually told by someone else that the reason why they actually one of the arguments for why they allowed women to actually begin taking these combat missions was they decided that it would never be the case that they would need to fly a mission like that anymore since we have drones.
It's the same thing with a combat, right? We just don't have as many soldiers on the ground. We have other forms of war.
Right.
So,
Pastor, I have to ask you, in the last few years, I've woken up to the idea that we are absolutely saturated in egalitarian culture everywhere around us, even inside the church. And so some of the things that we're saying here are going to hit people's ears really harshly. And especially, I think, a lot of young men, because they want to consider themselves masculine. They think arguing against you to protect the women that they want to be preachers is being masculine. But for a young man who's hearing this and like, okay, if egalitarianism is everywhere in the culture, how do I start to develop a masculine form of Christianity?
Well, it has to start with your relationship to the Lord, of course, right? We still all submit to God. So you have to start there. You have to go to his word and And so part of being a man as a Christian, well, all men should do this, but is seeking to obey God. So sanctification should play out somewhat differently for men and women, in that a man should seek to be a godly man and a woman a godly woman. And so there's going to be different duties, different characteristics, and so I think the Bible, like it calls all people to be courageous, but that should play out a little bit differently for a man. I mean, in some cases, that's going to be literally fighting, right? I mean, you have that in the Old Testament. Right. Be strong and courageous, as you go into war. But otherwise, it's going to be responsible, take up the duties God has placed on you as a man, get a job, work hard in life, and seek to win a woman and marry and provide for her and have children and
baptize them.
And make sure you baptize them.
Of course. I remember years ago, I think too, like Christians need to be thoughtful about this with our kids, like as you're training them up, because we're training them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. But even that's not gender neutral. I mean, as we raise up your boys and your girls, be thinking about these are different kinds of arrows. They're all arrows. They're all to be sharp and they're all to do damage to the enemy. But we want our daughters to grow up seeing what they're for. And we want our sons to grow up seeing what they're for. I remember years ago, one of the examples that Pastor Doug gave that was really helpful in making this clear to me was he said we need to be careful about this, particularly in our Christian schools. And he said a lot of times our Christian schools, institutions don't tend to be boy friendly.
That's right.
Institutions tend to be color inside the lines, tuck your shirt in and all the rest of it. And it can tend to, if we're not careful, feminize the boys. Mm-hmm. And the girls are all, checking their boxes and getting their straight A's. And the only boys that get the school awards, for example, are the ones that,
are feminine.
Are kind of feminine, and it's like they are acting like all the girls. And he said we need to be mindful of this and we need to figure out ways to see real masculinity. And the example he gave is, when you have teenage girls, their piety is going to look differently. Mm-hmm. And so, maybe it's, a girlfriend's going through a hard time and they leave a little note in the locker with the Bible verse, I'm thinking about you and praying for you. But that would be
Gabe,
weird.
Don't leave me one of those.
Yeah, but you don't want to set that up and be like, now boys, if you were really Christian and really godly, you'd be writing little, curly Q Bible verses and putting, no,
for
we
your
don't.
buddy.
You got to get detention if you do that.
Yeah.
But he said, you might be walking down a hall in a Christian school one day and see one boy punch another kid in the face. And you might say, whoa, what's going on? And grab him and say, what happened? He says, he asked a non-Christian girl out. And you say, very good.
Right response.
Did you learn your lesson?
Yeah.
If you say it's never okay to hit, well, no, you're wrong. That's unbiblical. That's not true. And sometimes the way that men communicate is just different. Yeah. And sometimes it's a hard word. Sometimes it's a punch. Sometimes it's a grab them by the, what do you think you're doing? Right. What the heck do you think you're doing? Right. And that's how men love one another. That's how iron sharpens iron. And I'm not saying fist fights, is the way that, solves everything. But I'm just saying a godly parent, a godly teacher, a godly pastor, if those two kids ended up in your, those two boys ended up in your principal's office and you're a godly principal, you ought to be thinking, there might be some correction to be made, but nevertheless, you're saying, good on you.
Yeah.
Good work. That is godliness in a young man.
Yeah.
Right.
Calling his friend out for, being interested in a non-Christian girl.
Yeah.
How much time you got left?
I got time.
You got time?
Good.
Good. Okay. Should you
I heard Zach was coming. I was like,
can I ask a question?
After
No,
this
it's been
ad.
like 20 minutes.
Don't we have?
he usually hogs it. Go ahead.
Speak of education, shall we, Pastor? That's the time for you to read the ad.
I'm going to read the ad.
Yeah, we got an ad.
Speaking of education, I see what you did there.
Uh-huh.
Today's culture shifts like sand, but New St. Andrews College. The cut and paste is hilarious on this because it doesn't make sense. You should go to New St. Andrews College. By the way, I brought my mug in.
That's nice.
It says New St. Andrews College, and such.
That's nice.
You should go there. Logic and language, hard work and joyful courage, old books and godly professors. New St. Andrews College provides time-tested resources that can equip your student for any vocation and for being men and women who know what men and women are.
The guys punch each other in the face.
Yeah, sometimes. If need be.
If need be.
That'd be fine. It'd be totally fine. NSA.edu. Check it out today.
All right, you can go with your
All
question.
right, Gabe, you have a question?
Yeah.
It better be good.
So
I'm going to veto it if it's not.
I went down your Twitter thread, and you seem like a little bit out of the normal PCA lane of how
We're
you
gonna need some
handle
bourbon for this.
your you can see where it's going.
I see where this is going.
And so like I said earlier, I grew up in the PCA in the 80s and 90s and 2000s. I end up over the different states. I end up moving here to Moscow in 2002. So I've been in PCA churches in Texas, New Mexico, Oregon, all members with my family there at those churches. And my experience with the PCA was the pastors wouldn't touch politics. I mean, I don't think I know my pastor in Texas would touch politics in the schoolroom because he taught at our school, but normally it had to do with North and South. The war of northern aggression kind of politics.
Whoa.
That kind of thing. But so over time, it seems like the PCA has really disconnected itself from the political process and speaking into politics. But I go down your Twitter thread and I see something very different. I see you kind of engaging in politics and talking into politics. In fact, you got a PCA pastor in Florida banned you from their Twitter thread because you were challenging him on politics recently. I guess kind of two questions.
Why'd you bring that up? That was kind of a sore spot.
Yeah.
I don't like getting blocked, but some people do. Sometimes.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'm just kidding.
So I guess kind of two questions here. One is, why should pastors be speaking into politics? And then kind of related to that, why is the PCA, now things might be changing a little bit. It sounds like you know some more conservative movements that are going on than I do. But why is let's just start with the first question. Why should pastors be involved in politics and speaking into that world?
Well, I think when we're preaching, we shouldn't get into politics when it's unnecessary, I guess. But part of the thing today is we're not debating like tariff rates, right?
Yeah.
It's not like some old politics back in the day.
Some obscure detail.
not.
But the Bible speaks to that still.
Right. But I'm thinking when we're preaching to our congregations, I mean, we should educate them, apply the Bible to their lives. But there's so many things in politics today that we just have to speak to as the church, right? We have to equip our people to live in a world that is hostile towards Christian beliefs,
right?
Especially in the area of sexuality. So I think that's part of it is just the way politics have gone today. They've become very theological, and so we have to speak to things there. On Twitter, I think social media. I think I'm probably going to maybe address things that I wouldn't address in a sermon, just maybe isn't suitable. So some pastors don't want to get into those things. I don't want to bind people's consciences, but if there's arguments on a certain issue, or I think we should be applying the Bible in this way, then I speak to it, whether it's abortion or transgenderism. I mean, there's all these threats we're facing today, and we do want to train our people, our flocks, to think biblically about these things. And so that's one reason to talk politics to some extent.
Seems like you're also like, even if not everything is suitable for the pulpit, you're a counselor.
Right.
People are coming to you for counsel. You're also going to be a Bible study teacher. You have a catechetical.
How to think about the Bible, how to apply it to your circumstances.
Yeah, so somebody might just come and say, Pastor, how should I think about
Christian nationalism?
How should I think about that?
Yeah.
And so you have to have a comprehensive theological answer.
Right.
Yeah. So how
it's not just one verse, right?
Or
It's
at least even if you don't know the answer right off the top of your tongue, right, or top of your tongue. I did a Gabe.
Yeah, but we all knew what you're saying. That's what.
There's the top of your tongue and the bottom of your tongue
and the tip of your tongue, right, and the top of your head.
Yeah.
But even if you don't have the answer, being willing to say, hey. Let me look into that with you.
Think about it.
Let's study that. I mean, because not every pastor has time to follow all the things. But we are pastors who are shepherding these souls through this world.
I'm sorry, guys. This is hard for me. Why don't we ever talk like this as it relates to the family?
What do you mean?
We don't ever say, oh, well, we talk about the government and say, hey, why don't you, Pastor, you're a little more confident about talking about the government than most people. Well, nobody ever says that about when they talk about and preach on the family. Everybody expects the pastor
to preach on the family.
Yeah.
Everybody expects the pastor to preach on the individual. Yeah. Everybody expects the pastor to preach on
when
morals
it comes to politics,
and righteousness,
dancing.
right?
Yeah.
So what part of the government somehow is outside the civil magistrate? What side is outside of the God's reign?
Of course, the Bible, it speaks to both. You have Romans 13 on submitting to governing authorities, and then you also have instructions for the family. So you're right. Politics are definitely not outside the Bible.
Well, and what about the Ten Commandments?
And
Those don't apply. Those don't apply to the state.
Book of Deuteronomy.
I'm just saying, like, I'm sorry, government have does that not apply to the government? You shall have no other gods but the true God. Are we afraid to preach that to our civil magistrate?
Yeah.
How about don't lie?
Thou shalt not steal.
How about stealing?
Unless by majority vote.
How about the Lord's Day?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah.
I mean, all of a sudden, it's just so funny how that everybody expects we don't ever have this conversation. You know, I was thinking about Vodi Bakum when he talked about this. Vodi was saying, when it comes to homosexuality, we kind of pad it. Now, the way the Bible talks about this, in case there's any homosexuals here,
I would love you.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
I know homosexuals, and so we work and we make all these caveats. You know, the whole intent dies the death of 1,000 cuts.
Right.
And we do the exact same thing when it comes to the civil magistrate.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
We have some things to say because you're under the authority of God, so submit and obey or be crushed. That's the same thing we would say to the sinner. That's the same. There's not a government that's existing that is outside the authority of Scripture. And so it's funny how I think even our own mindsets are like, pastors talking on politics.
Well, and here's another issue: is it's not just preaching from the pulpit, but the church, I think, has a duty to speak to the state and correct it when it gets out of line.
Yeah.
So and so this ties in. We were talking a little bit about there's an overture before the General Assembly. Well, hopefully we'll go through the committee this summer, which would call the state. This from the PCA would call the state to ban transgender surgeries on minors.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, seems like common sense to me. I mean, this is harmful, obviously, towards minors. Yeah. I mean, I don't think anybody should be having these surgeries. But we're talking about people who we don't allow to drink alcohol or do a variety of other things.
Cigarettes.
Can't buy cigarettes, but hey, you can mutilate your body.
Cut your junk off.
Yeah, I mean, so this seems like if we can't speak to this, what are we going to speak to as the church?
Right.
So tell me about this overture. So this overture went forward, and
so it's up. I believe a presbytery sent it up. It's Overture 12.
Yep, Overture 12, petitioning government to end sex change procedures for minors.
What's the presbytery? Does it say who sent it?
Evangel Presbytery.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to read some of that at the bottom, but yeah, it's petitioning the government.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we should do this all the time, but there is a place for the church to speak to the state. I mean, we've done it before with abortion.
Right.
The PCA has. So this is not out of line. I mean, this is stuff we do.
The SBC does it like every year about racism.
Yeah.
They repent every year.
We want you to know, we still think racism is bad. It's
and the
really
PCA
bad.
did this about every 5 years for a while. You know.
All right, so Pastor, I got to hit you up on Christian nationalism. This is a big topic right now. Oh yeah, you might want to drink a lot of water for this. The conversation is having right now. It seems that America has lost its Christian identity, and a lot are trying to figure out how to get it back. What is your take on Christian nationalism to nationalism or to not to nationalism?
And do you want New Mexico to be Christian?
I do want all civil governments to bow the knee to Christ. So I think they should certainly be theistic, but I still think they should recognize the name of Christ. I don't think I want an established church per se, where it's like the Presbyterian state of New Mexico or something. But and I think we should want Christian laws reflecting God's word. And so I know there's the whole debate about applying the first table of the law to the state, but I think some of that's inevitable that if you don't have, I mean, you guys talk about this, I think probably if you don't have blasphemy laws, you're going to have some anti-Christian blasphemy laws, right?
Right.
So we're kind of seeing that today. So I think some of that's inevitable.
You're really playing it safe right now.
So you want me to call myself a Christian nationalist?
I'm just trying to figure out,
I don't really have a problem with the term as long as it's understood. I mean, some people, I guess, define it in a bad way. And so then, but yeah, I mean, I'm reading Stephen Wolf's book. I haven't finished it yet, but it's.
I was asked, I'll tell you guys, I was asked to preach in Texas on Christian nationalism.
Really?
Actually, I had there was the request. There's a church that
That's
actually
funny.
had me preach
Interesting.
over spring break, and they said we'd like you to preach on Christian nationalism. I was like, wow, that's kind of specific. And
We're going.
like, okay, we're going there. And so I just opened up by well, first of all,
you've already did it?
I did it. It's already done.
Oh, I want to hear this one.
I appreciate it, but I said this is the first time I've ever been asked to preach on Christian nationalism, so it might be my last time. And then I said, basically, if you're talking about Buffalo Head Man, Tumnus on January 6th in the court, in the Congress,
January 6th,
congressional quarters, then no, count me out. I'm not Buffalo Head Man. Even notwithstanding Tucker Carlson's attempt to rehabilitate him to some extent. But if we're talking about discipling the nations, teaching them to obey everything that Jesus Christ commanded, then absolutely I am.
Yeah.
Right? Great Commission,
Yeah.
which is something that every Bible Christian thought until about 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Like every Bible Christian, pretty much outside of like Anabaptists and extreme like two kingdom people.
Here's another thing. How about Sabbath laws? I mean, even when the states got rid of state churches, so they disestablished,
Still have Sabbath laws.
all Christians supported Sabbath laws. This wasn't just Presbyterians.
Right.
So, and those have been lost. And now I think that's certainly tied with really the dismissal of the Sabbath. Even in Reform circles, we really don't honor the Lord's Day.
Right, yeah.
People missing church, but also playing sports on formal sports and things on Sundays.
Right.
I mean, this is just I'm going there.
Yeah.
This is a huge problem today.
Christian nationalist right here, guys.
So maybe this will get you in more trouble. Are you going to vote DeSantis or Trump? Who do you want up there? Just wondering, Pastor.
I mean, I think DeSantis is obviously going to be more qualified as far as ethics and morality, right? So there's that there. He's also doing a great job as governor of Florida. So, I mean, if I'm in Florida, I don't want him to run for president.
Right.
But,
We've talked about that. Yeah.
So, I mean, at some point, I think he'd probably be a really good president. But, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about Trump, obviously.
Yeah.
I do. Did you guys see the interview with Tucker Carlson and Trump?
I saw that it happened, but I haven't watched it.
Yeah. I mean, Trump just frustrates me.
Yeah.
Frustrates me.
Yeah, say it the right way.
Yep, there you go.
Is he still championing the vaccine?
Yeah, he's not changing that position.
He is going to change?
No, he's not changing that position. He's going to hold on to
I
it.
don't know. He didn't bring that up.
So
in the interview,
here's the weird part, because Robert Kennedy is running on the Democratic ticket,
and man, he's got my ear.
Not mine.
The dude's like old.
Did you hear his talk at Hillsdale?
The dude's like basically old school liberal.
Yeah.
Like he's like, I mean, which is virtually indistinguishable from most Republicans, by the way.
Yeah, right.
Right.
He's John McCain.
Yeah, probably.
Sorry.
But
But
I would say probably better
Yes,
than John
yes.
McCain. I think he's further right on being like he's
on freedom.
Freedom
of religion,
he's
freedom
actually,
of vaccine,
he's actually talking
freedom of-
about like getting the government out of our lives. He hates the vaccine. He hates the Pfizer corruption, the Fauci corruption.
His talk at Hillsdale
Like-
was pretty amazing.
like
So he can see the sun.
Like he's more he's more libertarian than most of our politicians,
Yep.
which would be a hilarious. I mean,
know.
if you end up with like Trump and Kennedy, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, how's he going to get through the Democratic primary?
It doesn't seem like it's likely, but
No, he has more of a chance of getting through the Republican primary than the Democratic primary.
He does.
No, 100%. Yeah.
he does.
So,
Yeah.
Pastor, here's my last question for you, and we'll let you go because I'm not going to hold you hostage since you don't really engage with my questions. But I think you got some deeper thoughts. I see him running around in your head, and I'm like, I know he really
He's a
wants
lawyer.
That's right.
He's a lawyer.
You're right. Never mind. I got it. Now, if he was prosecuting me, I'd be all over the
you'd
place.
be in trouble.
Yeah. So, what are the fights that you're looking at right now that you're like, I want that one?
Like politically or in the church?
Yes.
Politically.
You can give me both
he's
of
saying
them.
all.
Any of them. Which one are you armed for bear on?
Well, I think we definitely got to go after this transgender stuff. I think it's tied with the feminism, but it's like the worst outcome, right? And training kids in this stuff, I just think it's going to cause a lot of problems. It already is. So I think we need to target that, and I don't think we should shy away. So something like this overture, I think we should be fully behind. Obviously, I'm very much opposed to abortion. I think we should go hard after that. We should criminalize it. I've written on that some.
Yeah.
So.
I got. Well, I mean, this is a bomb. I don't.
What's that?
Try to drop a bomb.
You gonna drop a bomb?
What's a bomb?
Well, you can drop it, and then if we don't like it, you can hit the music.
We
and we'll
can.
go.
Yeah.
But let's see what's your
Get
bomb.
ready. I mean, like, do you think there's a connection between like Baptist and Presbyterian? And Presbyterians. I included Presbyterians in that.
Yeah, I'm
and
sure
the
you
current
did.
transgender movement.
Backstage. Hey, thanks for coming on the show. We're not gonna get you in that kind of trouble.
No comment.
That's our smoke. That's our smoke. If you're single, get married. If you're married, have you some kids. If you have kids, go baptize them. Until Monday, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast. This is Cross Politics.
No show tomorrow.
A lot of parents are waking up to the problems of the current American educational system. And when the Department of Education can't determine what a boy is or what a girl is, why in the world would any sane parent trust them with a math curriculum? We are regular Christian parents who found ourselves with children to educate, and we found that the options available usually fell into two categories. Either the education was good, but was lacking in the Christian department, or the Christian part was solid and the education was lacking. So we got a group of parents together and said, why not? Let's start classical Christian school.
When I was first approached with doing this school, being a teacher as well as having my son be a student, I wasn't looking for anything different, and this came along, and it has been just such an answer to prayer of little things that we didn't realize that the school would then give to our son that we didn't know we were needing. And there were just a lot of benefits to coming to school. The programs that people could offer, some of the areas where I'm not the strongest in, some teachers were able to do it. And then they asked if I would be interested in helping to teach, and I jumped on board.
I began very skeptical, if I'm being honest. There have been a few days where, especially in the beginning, I wondered if I made the right choice. But it is the relationship and the fellowship that is fostered here that has taken away any of my hesitation or my fears.
If you're trying to decide, is school right for my child? Is staying home? And, you know, I like that this kind of gives you a feel of both of those things. Like, I still feel in charge and in control of my son's education. But I also know that maybe science is not the best thing that I can teach him. His science teacher comes in and can just help take that load from me and be able to help him. And it's been great.
We want to be the tool to help you achieve what we believe is the most important job in the world, training up your children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord.
They may be future pastors. They may be future politicians. They may just be a dad. They may be a mom. We don't know what the Lord's called them to. And the fact that I get the honor of being able to be a part of that journey and their education.
It feels perfect for right now because I'm watching my son love to learn. And I get that it feels like a risk to step out of what society says is normal, because the normal thing is you put your kindergartner in school 5 days a week, 8 to 3, every day for the rest of their lives, and that's what you're supposed to do. But then you end up with an 18-year-old that you barely know, who hates every bit of school, who barely knows what they want to do with their future. And to be able to be a part of this, it's like I'm watching a dream that I didn't even really know was a dream kind of unfold.
Our students love being here. Our teachers are excited. They are committed, and they are here for the long haul. They're here because they believe in the mission.
You have to decide what's most important to you. And what was most important to me is surrounding myself and my son with like-minded people who were ready to go to battle, because that's what we're doing.